The United Kingdom has an epic history and a wealth of secrets still to uncover. Every year, hundreds of archaeologists dig, dive, and sieve to find clues to add to the great historical jigsaw of our ancestors' lives.
You know when people say, what's the best thing you've ever found, guys? This.
I'm Professor Alice Roberts. This year we've uncovered some astonishing finds and made some truly groundbreaking discoveries.
Wow, look at that.
Each team of archaeologists has been armed with a dig diary camera so they can record their discoveries as they happen.
That is brilliant. Dave, I love you.
Our roving archaeologist, Dr. Nisha McSweeney, is out on the digs.
Who are we looking at?
It's royal.
I will be inviting the teams to bring in their finds for closer analysis. That is absolutely beautiful. In this episode, we're in the north of the British Isles. The north of Britain is stuffed full of history and archaeology, from Neolithic settlements on Orkney to Hadrian's Wall, from a Viking capital in York to a king buried in a Leicester car park. And I'm here on the banks of Loch Ness, close to Culloden, the site of the last great battle of the Jacobite Rebellion in 1745. We'll join digs right across the north as archaeologists search for a long-lost Viking drinking hall, discover Roman treasure hidden in an Anglo-Saxon cemetery, and reveal evidence of our ancestors' deepest fears. Welcome to Digging for Britain. Our first dig takes us to the childhood home of Britain's shortest reigning monarch. She was a first cousin of Henry VIII's son, Edward VI, and she was on the English throne in 1553 from the 10th to the 19th of July. She's known as the 9 Days Queen, Lady Jane Grey. In the Leicestershire countryside lies Bradgate Park. 850 acres of stunning, rugged landscape. This ancient estate was the family seat of Britain's often forgotten monarch, Lady Jane Grey, who's believed to have lived here as a child. Professor Richard Thomas and his team from Leicester University are excavating within what remains of the estate's main building, Bradgate House. This is thought to have been one of the first unfortified aristocratic houses in England, dating back to the early 16th century. Richard is looking for evidence that could support that early date and the long-held theory that this was indeed the childhood home of Lady Jane.
Very little information about Bradgate House, both in terms of the written record and in terms of images. But we know next to nothing about the house as it looked in the 16th century.
Lady Jane was born in 1536. The great niece of King Henry VIII, she was raised as a devout Protestant. Before Henry's son, King Edward VI, died, he declared that his first cousin, Lady Jane, should succeed him. She was proclaimed queen at just 16. But England was in the middle of a power struggle.
There was a lot of turmoil over different religious sides. So Henry VIII sets up the Church of England, but there's still quite a strong Catholic following in England at the time. So there's a lot of tension between the two sides, if you like.
Lady Jane's aunt, Mary Tudor, was a Catholic, and Mary's followers were determined to see her on the throne. Just 9 days after Lady Jane was declared queen, she was deposed, locked up in the Tower of London, and eventually executed. At the dig, the team have made an unexpected discovery. It looks like the large upstanding brick building was constructed over something older.
I'm standing at the moment inside a room, and inside that room we've got this other brick structure that's over on my left-hand side, and it's got a tiled surface behind me. And what this is a fireplace, and we can tell that because we've got fire-cracked tiles that belong to the hearth. It's beginning to look a little bit like a kitchen structure.
But as they excavate further, they realise it's not just a kitchen. It's the foundations of another entire house, predating the larger brick building, which has always been assumed to be Lady Jane's home.
What do you think this structure is?
Well, potentially this might be a garderobe, which is the medieval word for a toilet.
Garderobes were the luxury loos of the Tudor era, a room with a seat connected to a shaft that dropped waste into a moat or drain below. Only the wealthiest households had one.
After getting all the rubble out, we have found 600-year-old excrement and so forth.
Does it smell?
It does. It has a strange smell that you can't really compare to anything else. That is a bloody big
braid.
The team want to pin down the date of this mystery building. As the days pass, they discover tantalising traces of the people who lived here, including what they ate.
From our excavations, we can work out what kind of animal it's come from, so things like peacocks, some marine fish and some other exotic animals. And of course, because we're in the middle of a deer park, we know that they are eating quite a lot of venison. We've got quite high status living here.
The team also find evidence that this was a religious household.
So I think one of my favourites has been this. It's got a decoration on that appears to be Adam and Eve and the Garden of Eden. And then you've got the apple tree, and then you've got you can see the snake curling around the trunk of the tree.
Known as a pilgrim badge, tokens like this often depicted biblical stories or saints and were worn by the devout. This land was owned by the Grey family long before Lady Jane was born, but it's not yet clear which generation of Greys lived in this earlier structure. The team are looking for clues to show exactly when this older building was in use. And halfway through the dig, they have a breakthrough.
This morning when we were clearing away some of the demolition layer in this area, however, we uncovered a sovereign penny, minted during the reign of Henry VIII, so we don't know the exact date of minting, but somewhere between 1509 and 1547. That's important because that gives us a date somewhere in the sort of early to mid 16th century. We can say with some degree of confidence that these walls came down sometime in the first half of the 16th century.
This tiny coin suggests the older building was in use when Lady Jane was a child. Richard now believes that these older foundations, not the upstanding ruins, are what's left of the childhood home of England's 9 days Queen. I've asked Richard to come and explain more about this exciting new revelation. So where's that kind of mythology come from then, that what you see above ground was her house?
We've got historical records that tell us that the standing room is where she spent her childhood. And we'd always assumed that this traditional narrative that the standing room, you see the brick structure, was her house. So when we started the project, we had absolutely no idea that we would be discovering an earlier house and that the upstanding structure would turn out to be later. So it was completely unexpected.
So you've got some of the finds here. How do those relate to this building?
Yeah, so we knew we had this earlier building, but what we really needed is something that gives us an absolute date for when it was in use. And the coins have been really, really helpful in helping us to determine those dates. And this is a coin, silver coin that was minted at the Tower of London, and it was minted somewhere between 1544 and 1547. You know, she was born in 1536, so potentially she's 8 years old, running around Bradgate House at the time this coin is dropped on this floor surface, and then it becomes sealed by another floor surface later on.
So we're getting this glimpse of a moment where there's this little girl running around in the house. Yeah. Her great-uncle is on these coins, and she has got no conception at all that she will eventually end up on the throne.
Absolutely none whatsoever.
What else have we got here? Some objects that tell us a little bit about everyday life in the house, perhaps?
Yeah, this is a small fragment of a hand-painted jug. And the jug will have come from the Netherlands, so it's what we call a tin glaze. It's commonly known as Mallorca ware. But what's nice is it's a very small fragment, but it's got a motif of the Passion of the Christ. So...
Hang on a minute. There's a pillar with a spiral and then a sort of a fan-like arrangement over here. How do you know that this is meant to be something about the crucifixion?
So, yeah, thankfully we've got complete vessels where we can actually see what the entire picture looks like. But what we've got here is this pillar. That is the pillar where Jesus was whipped. And then we can see the fan you're referring to, that is the whip. And again, it's telling us lots of different stories. It's telling us about trade connections, it's telling us about their status, to be able to afford these, luxury imports. But it's also telling us, again, about that centrality of religion to daily life.
And what about Lady Jane Grey herself? Do we know where she ended up? Where was she buried?
Because she was of royal descent, she gets executed at the Tower of London. And so her body, she's supposed to be buried in one of the chapels at the Tower. So, of course, all sorts of local legends that the body was spirited back to Bradgate and was reburied, but we have no expectation that was the case.
And why do we not call her Queen Jane?
Yeah, it's really interesting why she's still Lady Jane Grey. The reason is because she although she was proclaimed Queen, she never had a coronation. So it's effectively a technicality that we don't call her Queen Jane.
It's just extraordinary, isn't it? She had no idea when she was a little girl that she would end up sitting on the throne, and then she's on the throne for 9 days, and that is effectively a death sentence.
Yeah, at age 16.
Yeah.
It's a real tragic story.
Now we travel to Northern Ireland, where archaeologists have discovered the cemetery of a Victorian workhouse. Now, the 19th century was a pivotal time in Irish history, a time of great hardship for many, where poverty and disease were made even worse by the Great Famine. Our roving archaeologist Nisha McSweeney joins the excavation.
I've come to the small county downtown of Downpatrick, where archaeologists are excavating on the site of a Victorian workhouse built in 1842. By the mid-19th century, there were almost 2,000 workhouses across the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. They were designed to house and feed the poor in exchange for hard, physical labour. In Downpatrick, the land connected to the poorhouse is now needed for access to a new school. But the site contains the workhouse's cemetery, so a specialist archaeological team has been brought in to excavate and document the burials before they can be carefully reinterred nearby. I'm with osteoarchaeologist Bethany Johnson to find out what she's discovered about the people who died here.
These are people from the workhouse. Is there anything we can tell about the bones at this stage?
As we're taking the bones out, it has become quite obvious that, forgetting how they're actually being preserved in the ground, they're not as robust as you would like. These people were malnourished. The bones sort of reflect that.
The poor in Ireland relied almost solely on the potato to survive. In 1845, an aggressive plant pathogen known as the blight decimated crops throughout the country. This was the beginning of the Great Famine. The potato blight stretched workhouses like these to the limits.
The diet would have been quite limited, really, and they probably weren't actually meeting their calorific needs.
Documenting all the individuals buried here has been especially difficult because many of their remains had been found mixed together.
So, Bethany, can you just tell us what we've got here?
Here we have an exposed grave cut with at least 2 individuals. So you can see we've got 2 skulls at the top end here, one lying on top of the other, and then we have the rest of the bodies basically intermingling.
So, were these 2 buried in a single grave?
What's happening is the coffins are actually collapsing in on top of each other.
So 2 coffins stacked on one another,
Exactly.
the wood rots, and then the skeletons
fall through.
Actually, they've been buried with dignity. Somebody's made the effort.
They
to
are,
put them in
exactly,
coffins.
and it would have been really important for the people that they knew that they were actually going to be buried in a coffin.
So what's the kind of the maximum depth that they've been stacked?
Just in the far corner here, I think we had 8 individuals.
8?
Yes.
The highest stacks show that at a certain point, the death rate accelerated rapidly, beyond even famine levels. The cause was known as famine fever. In 1847, just 2 years after the famine struck, a deadly combination of relapsing fever and typhus ripped through Downpatrick and the workhouse.
Head archaeologist Chris Lynn understands how devastating the combination of famine and fever was. What kind of impact did it have on the workhouse?
The workhouse was really constructed for a population of 500.
Right.
But during the famine, it increased to 1,000. And because of the fever, there's like a sudden collapse of the population of the workhouse.
Right.
So people were dying, and then the population of the workhouse more or less instantly filled back up again because of the famine.
By 1849, just 7 years after this workhouse opened, 1 million Irish men, women and children had died. A further 2 million fled the country, many seeking refuge in America.
So this site for me has been a real eye-opener. We're only 150 years apart, and I'm sitting here, I'm only separated by a few generations from the person. And that has made this very immediate experience for me. It's all the more so because part of my family is Irish, my father's Irish, so this feels like I'm sitting here excavating a bit of my own history.
The team estimate there are close to 400 burials in this single cemetery. It will take them more than a year to carefully exhume, document and reinter the remains. But what they reveal stands as a shocking reminder of the devastation that poverty, famine and fever wreaked on this community in such a short period of history.
Our next dig is a very old site with a modern twist. Archaeology is a detective story. We're looking for clues, piecing them together, trying to understand past events, working out what those societies were like, getting inside our ancestors' minds. Sometimes the clues are hidden in plain sight and it just takes a keen eye to recognise them. Our next story takes us back into the depths of prehistory, but then collides with a much more recent tale of superstition, witches and the occult. The dig is taking place at Creswell Crags, located on the border of Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire. It's a limestone gorge riddled with caves that have been studied by archaeologists for over a century. Those investigations revealed evidence of human activity here, dating back more than 10,000 years. Back in Series 1 of Digging for Britain, I visited Creswell to study their spectacular Ice Age cave art. Today, a small team of archaeologists from the University of Sheffield are conducting a new investigation into a more recent period of history here. They are digging outside the caves, where a medieval village once stood.
We're looking in a non-cave context because nobody's excavated outside the caves yet. We know from maps that there were some structures at the east end of the gorge, and they were there until early 19th century.
And there was a fairly obvious hint that there might be a building here in the form of that arch there. So we put our trench here. We thought that we might get part of the a bit of the post-medieval settlement, and who knows, if we can get down far enough, maybe even some earlier stuff.
So by conducting an archaeological excavation there, we might find some material that gives us some insight into the people who lived here.
The village was occupied from medieval times right up to the 18th century, but the team's initial finds date from much earlier.
This is a flint blade tool, or a flake. It looks to be a Neolithic blade, or a Neolithic flake, if you like, which is interesting because it's much older than what we thought we were going to find in that structure. It's a reminder that the archaeology here at Creswell spans this immense period of time.
Most of what we know about Creswell comes from the work of amateur archaeologist Albert Leslie Armstrong, who led a series of digs in the 1920s and 30s.
Armstrong is famous and notorious. He was an early archaeologist that was very interested in the Paleolithic in Britain, and he pretty much identified the Paleolithic in Britain. The bad thing is that the techniques for excavation at that time were picks and shovels and wheelbarrows, and not the kind of control that we like these days.
Unfortunately for the team, their finds tell them less about the lives of the 18th century villagers and more about Armstrong's early 20th century methods.
The first one we found was this bottle cap, which actually has a date on it, which says 1933 on it. And obviously Armstrong's dig was in the 1930s. And over here is a George V coin. Obviously George V died in 1936. So this, again, fits perfectly with Armstrong's dig.
The reason for this renewed interest in the lives of these villagers at Creswell is thanks to an incredible revelation announced in early 2019 about something that had been right under Armstrong's nose all along. The walls of the caves at Creswell Crags are covered in strange marks, scratched into the rock.
There are literally hundreds of marks scarring the wall all the way around. There's hardly a small space of clear rock that you could put another one on.
For generations, archaeologists have just assumed that these marks were graffiti, unworthy of serious attention.
We knew that there was a lot of graffiti in the caves, but what people hadn't realised that hiding between these marks, there were these single marks that are the most pertinent ones.
But in 2019, a pair of amateur symbologists happened to visit the site. They realised the significance of these markings, recognising them as witches' marks.
We realised that they were quite important because there were so many of them and they were in such a concentration in one particular place. So we knew there was a story to be told here.
Witches' marks, or apotropaic marks, from the Greek meaning to turn away, were used by fearful locals to ward off evil spirits.
King James wrote a treatise called Demonology, which set out ways in which witches could be feared and witches could be seen and found and how they infiltrated houses.
James I believed that witches existed and were responsible for many of society's ills. His 1597 treatise on demonology described different sorts of demons and witches, and he was personally involved in witchcraft trials. A belief in witches persisted right up to the 19th century.
The most common mark at Creswell is the conjoined V, which refers to the cult of the Virgin and the Virgin Mary. We sometimes find marks of Christ's name. One that we find is the IX, and this is known from other cave contexts and from churches and buildings as well.
We've also got a 1718 and a 1717, which is right in the middle of the period that we think that these probably date to. And further down the tunnel on the right-hand side, we've got possibly our oldest date of all, which is 1505.
The dates place the marks within the time frame of the village, and they're particularly concentrated in one area of the cave.
What we've got here is what some of the press have christened the gateway to hell, and there's a gaping chasm in the middle of this chamber here, which has got to be 12 to 15 feet deep. There may have been a draft blowing through that hole, and evil spirits are meant to follow flows of air, so it could have been that was concerning them. Maybe there's been some infant mortality, cows aren't producing enough milk, which you might think is down to an evil influence, and that you might want to do something about that and drive that evil into the furthest reaches of the darkest part of this cave in order to trap it there.
It turns out that the most compelling evidence of the villagers themselves has been hiding in plain sight, inside the caves, all along.
We haven't yet found anything that which ties it into the witches' marks, but we haven't finished yet. We're still going down.
The excavation of the village is only in its early stages, but the real revelation this year has been the discovery of these witches' marks, a rare glimpse of the beliefs and superstitions of the villagers who once lived here. The Anglo-Saxon period in English history dawns after the collapse of the Roman Empire and lasts right up to the Norman conquest. We learn a lot about the Anglo-Saxons from their burials, in particular the grave goods. We learn about the clothes people wore, the objects that they found precious, and the way that they constructed their identities. Now a dig in Lincoln is focusing on Anglo-Saxon death in order to shed light on those past lives. This site is on a farm not far from the Lincolnshire coast, just outside the tiny village of Scremby. First discovered by a local metal detectorist, it's a hilltop cemetery containing almost 100 graves dating back to the early Anglo-Saxon period in the 6th century AD. Digging for Britain first visited the site last year, when Dr. Hugh Wilmot and his team from the University of Sheffield were starting to excavate the site, which was threatened with damage from agricultural vehicles. They discovered an extraordinary proportion of high-status burials containing precious and exotic grave goods, like these ivory rings, which may have been imported from Africa.
This site dates from the migration period in the sort of late 5th, early 6th century. And this is a period when you're starting to get Anglo-Saxon migrations appearing into eastern England and then moving into central England after the end of the Roman Empire.
Thankfully, the team continued filming their dig diaries after our visit last season. One piece they later uncovered proved to be incredibly rare.
Oh, beautiful. It's completely different.
A spectacularly well-preserved bronze and enamel bowl. The team have returned this year to complete the dig.
This is the trench we're excavating this summer, and there are burials right the way across it.
They're continuing to find an astonishing array of grave goods, catching their discoveries on their dig diary cameras.
Well, earlier on, we started excavating this burial and a bit of iron came up and we weren't sure what it was, but now it's been fully exposed and it's really rather exciting. It's an Anglo-Saxon sea axe, which is kind of like a dagger, so it's bigger than a knife but smaller than a sword. I'm just going to lift the sea axe.
Iron weapons are often found in male Anglo-Saxon graves, perhaps suggesting warrior status.
Round of applause.
It's an important find, as there have been so few intact male burials at this site.
The females are sort of buried on their sides, often in a crouched position, and have to be dug a bit deeper in. The males are buried a bit shallower, lying on their backs and extended, and you don't need a very deep hole for that. You know, farmers don't know they're there, and they often get just totally wiped out when ploughing takes place.
We don't know why men and women were buried at different depths, but it means that many deeper female burials have survived completely intact.
Well, we've just started lifting one of the necklaces on one of the females there, and one of the fine beads that's come up is this rock crystal one. It's obviously a naturally occurring mineral, and it's extremely hard, and it's been polished and smoothed into this really super bead that looks like it was made yesterday. And they're not that common a find.
But not all the finds are simply decorative.
Oh, wow, how's it going here? What have we got?
We've kind of got an indication that there might be a girdle hanger around here, but we're not quite sure yet.
Girdle hangers were worn at the waist and often shaped like keys. Scholars believe that they represent an important symbol of female identity, possibly relating to a role as head of a household or even a landowner. Women had comparatively high status in Anglo-Saxon society, with legal rights, including the right to own land and the right to leave their husbands. Midway through the season, the team's dig cameras catch a once-in-a-lifetime find in another female grave.
It's a silver bracelet. It's got sort of incised design on it, and it's right on the surface of the grave. So, you know, it's a really terrific find. It's a really, really special, rare object. This is the first one like this we found here, and there's probably only about less than half a dozen other ones that have been found nationally, and usually they're associated with individuals thought to be of really quite high status.
This season has been even more fruitful than last year.
We've done 2 seasons of work now, and I think we've learned pretty much as we're going to.
The quantity of rare finds in this ancient Lincolnshire cemetery suggests it was reserved for the most high-ranking people in this Anglo-Saxon community. Here you've been back at Scremby again, and you've had some amazing finds coming out of this cemetery.
We have.
Some quite characteristic Anglo-Saxon finds, but some unusual ones as well. This astonishing pole, I mean, that is absolutely beautiful. Is this an object which has any parallels elsewhere?
Well, this is a super object in its own right.
Yeah.
And it's even more exciting in the context it's in. So it's actually Roman. It probably dates to the 2nd century AD.
Really?
Yep. And it belongs to a group, there's about half a dozen similar vessels to this that are known from Roman Britain.
Yeah.
So it's a really rare object as a Roman vessel.
Yeah.
But then it's found buried 400 years after it's made in an Anglo-Saxon grave.
It was an antique.
Oh, absolutely.
So what's it made of? Is it bronze?
Yep, it's cast in bronze, and then this decoration is actually chased out with a sharp tool.
Right, OK.
And then it's infilled with enamelling. If you imagine that new shiny bronze with colours, you've got red, you've got green, you've got blue.
It would have been I mean, it is a gorgeous object now. It would have been absolutely bright and stunning, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. What have we got here then? What's that extraordinary thing?
Oh, this is really super. This is a little boar's head mount. You can see the tusks and the teeth there, and it's got these little garnet eyes.
So those garnets are looking a bit dull now, but they would have been bright red, wouldn't they?
We're not entirely sure what it is, but one possibility is it's possibly a mount of a helmet.
Right.
There's a bit of an association between the boar imagery and Anglo-Saxon helmets.
That is stunning. Now that brings me to this extraordinary bracelet. Absolutely beautiful. Wow.
Well, this is one of our star finds. It's not often you kind of find sort of large sort of silver objects in Anglo-Saxon burials. And
Can I pick it up? Is it too fragile?
No, it's remarkably stable. I mean, it's almost as if it's been made yesterday.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a very, very rare object. There's probably about a dozen of them known. From cemeteries across the country.
Yeah.
And most of those come from antiquarian excavations, so it's really nice to have one from a modern excavation.
And the ones that are known, are they of a similar style to this?
There are 2 broad styles. One's like this, which are sort of flat strips of silver that are just sort of wrapped around and tend to be heavier and have a sort of higher content of silver. And then you get another type where they're sort of crinkle cut, sort of thinner and sort of fluted. And they seem to have a sort of distinct regional variation.
And what about this pattern? Is that a kind of known pattern?
It's a really interesting pattern. Again, they tend to be decorated like this with this sort of punched decoration.
Yeah.
But this is the only one that has almost like a sort of stylised beast head or flower head at the end.
Yeah.
And the only other parallel I know of is actually on a piece of gold work from the Staffordshire Hoard.
Really?
There's a sort of gold strip that has a similar kind of decoration on the end.
And do you think the objects that they're buried with are sort of everyday objects, or are these objects specifically for the grave?
It's difficult to tell that, but I think most of these objects were actually things they were using all the time. So the beads, for instance, are often worn and, you know, slightly chipped. Perhaps some of the objects, like the silver bracelet, seem in remarkably good condition, so perhaps they were specifically put in for the burial.
What's your understanding of the cemetery now that you've more fully excavated it?
Well, what's been really interesting is that although it's been quite damaged by ploughing, we've managed to excavate pretty much 100% of the cemetery. We've got about 50 intact burials. That's probably about half of what there would have been originally. So it's one of these small little cemeteries that seems to come into use in the 6th century and then goes out of use by the middle of that century.
What about who they are in terms of their material wealth? Is it unusual, the amount of material wealth that you're seeing in those graves?
This is clearly a community that is very well connected and potentially quite wealthy.
as well. So they are choosing to bury their dead with a substantial amount of material culture. We tend to see these as small, isolated communities in the early Middle Ages, but actually they were probably part of a much wider network.
Well, they liked nice things, didn't they, quite
did.
clearly?
Yes.
Yeah, but at the moment, that is my favourite object of this series of Digging for Britain. It's
Fantastic.
amazing. As you go back in history, there are very strong links between Scandinavia and Scotland. The Vikings start by attacking places in Britain, Lindisfarne, Iona, but very quickly they're coming here not just to plunder and return home, but to stay. Our next dig takes us to Orkney, where archaeologists are investigating a large Viking settlement. Off the north coast of mainland Scotland sits Rousey, one of the Orkney Islands. It was an important seat of Norse power, and the west of the island is mentioned in the Icelandic Orkneyinga saga, documenting the colonisation of the region by the Viking Sigurd the Mighty. It's home to Scale, an abandoned farmstead with links back to the 17th century. But recently, archaeologists from the University of the Highlands and Islands discovered a long wall running beneath the farm building. The wall is estimated to be over 1,000 years old, which would place it in the Viking era, when the Northern Isles came under Norse rule. This year, the team, led by archaeologist Daniel Lee, has returned to the site along with local volunteers. They want to know if this wall could be more than just an ancient boundary. Scale is Norse for hall, and the team think it's possible that this wall could be part of a Viking longhouse or drinking hall. They use their dig diary to document what they find.
We've uncovered more of the wall in Trench 4, and we're extending that trench down to the west. So hopefully we'll be able to find the end of the wall.
Daniel suspects they're excavating one of the long sides of the building. He hopes to find another shorter rear wall at its end.
And we can find the internal area and try and assess what this building was used for and try and date it more securely.
While half the team gets stuck in trying to find the end of the ancient wall, others working in neighbouring trenches are already finding clues that this was a well-established Norse settlement.
We've got Trench 22, where we found some Norse artefacts and a kind of midney layer. And we had a pig skull and a pot lid and some pottery. Lots of garnet mica schist, which is typically Norse.
Garnet mica schist is a hard rock often used to make millstones, but it's not native to Orkney. The Vikings here most likely imported it from Norway or other parts of Scotland as they spread across the region. But there are also signs that they made ingenious use of the local materials available on this island.
This here's a spindle whorl, quite an exciting find that we've just made in Trench 4, and it's made with the ball joint off the top of a femur. So it's been sawn off, and then it's had a hole bored through it. You can see the ball joint there, and then that would have had a stick through it.
Spindle whorls are weights, often made from soapstone, antler or bone, giving a simple drop spindle the momentum needed to spin fibres into yarn. Despite success in the other trenches, the Viking hall itself is still proving elusive. The mystery wall seems to have no end.
What we got, Jess?
More of the wall that was uncovered last year, and we're hoping to find the corner really soon, but it's not looking promising.
But at the end of week 1, there's a glimmer of hope.
It's day 7 at Scale Farm. We've had a really exciting development in Trench 4. We've got another phase of wall on top of that in the northern side of the trench.
To find a new section of wall built on top of the first implies they're digging the foundations of a structure important enough to have been rebuilt or enlarged. So they start widening the trench.
And we've been trying to expose some of the internal area of what we think is a large building, maybe hoping it would be the hall at Scale.
They're now more than halfway through the dig. It's a race against time to find more conclusive evidence. And at last, they have a breakthrough.
Today we've extended the trench further to the south and we think we found it. We've got a very large longhouse, an early longhouse coming out from underneath the settlement mound down the slope to the west towards the shore.
Daniel's suspicions have been confirmed. In another trench they discover a second wall running parallel to the first. Along it they find what looks like evidence for seating, suggesting the structure was indeed a large longhouse.
We've got the inside face of the southern wall running up and down parallel with the trench edge, just there. And we think that this is one of these side benches down the inside face of the long hall that would run up and down that way, with a similar feature on the opposite side of the hall there. Then you'd have had the hearth somewhere here.
Elsewhere on the site, small personal items are turning up, characteristically Viking in style.
And just found this tiny fragment of really quite finely carved end of a Norse comb, which may have the antler teeth as well. It's got a nice circular design on the end. It's really quite an exciting find. How did it survive from the Norse period in this rubble? How did it get there?
As the days pass, the Great Hall is exposed, and it's even more impressive than Daniel had hoped.
We're looking at probably over 13, possibly 15 plus metres in length. So a really big building, metre-wide walls with internal benches and features starting to come through. So we're really chuffed about that.
A longhouse of this size is a remarkable discovery. Perhaps it could even have been the hall of Sigurd, the first Earl of Orkney himself. It's a reminder of just how strong those Scandinavian connections are here, taking us back to a time when Norse settlers were making this island their home. It's all very well invading a country and establishing a military presence there, but then you have to feed your army. Now, it's quite rare to find any evidence of how the Romans managed to support their troops in Britain. But now archaeologists in northwest Yorkshire are hoping to find some answers. At the northernmost point of the Yorkshire Dales National Park lies the majestic Swaledale. In 2009, a local amateur archaeology group uncovered the footprint of a single roundhouse, a typical Iron Age dwelling. But native Britons continued to make roundhouses right into the Roman period. Archaeologist Philip Barstow has been investigating the site and is returning this year with a team from the University of Newcastle to explore further.
It might be a continuation of this cobble surface that we're seeing.
Philip thinks there could be more dwellings, and he's focusing on an area that they began excavating in 2018.
This is Area 1. Last year, when we opened up the vast open area, we came across these flagstones. So our task this year is to cut into this and try to find the northern edge, because up to now we've only got one definite roundhouse.
As they excavate, the team are finding signs of the people that lived here.
Nice big fat juicy worm. I'll just remove him. And then you can see there. You can see the rim appearing. And the rest of it appears to be here. Oh, it's a lovely massive rim. That's a big pot.
Philip's suspicion that there may be other dwellings here proves to be correct. They've exposed another large cobbled surface with a curved reinforcing wall behind it.
We can confirm this is another roundhouse. It's about 4 or 5 metres in diameter. That's cobbled as well, and cobbled path going up to the west. Amazing. Absolutely amazing structure.
With another roundhouse appearing, this could be a village. But what's most striking is evidence of a sophisticated design feature not usually seen in roundhouses. this carved piece of stone is a door sill.
The work craftsmanship to actually create that lower surface to create an upper ridge there, so the door actually shuts against that.
This unusual masonry seems incongruous. It looks like the work of another group, the Romans.
I've seen no other parallels of this sort of construction in a native Britain site, but loads in Roman forts. So somebody is advising them or showing them or actually making these, and they're putting it in with the context of the house.
There certainly was a strong Roman presence in the area. After the Romans invaded in the 1st century AD, they steadily advanced north, setting up military strongholds along the way. By the mid-2nd century, there were around 50,000 Roman troops in Britain, and some of them were stationed near here.
We've got Bainbridge to the south, we've got Catterick to our east, and to our north we've got Greaterbridge and Bowes. At least 3 of those were in active occupation throughout the whole period.
And these forts needed food.
We've got a pit, flag-based, stones vertical at the sides, well-built, and some sort of possible chute here. Maybe we've found where they're actually storing their grain. I'm just really pleased with this.
Other finds on the site suggest that not only were the native Britons storing grain here, they were processing it using Roman equipment.
What we're getting back, the information we're getting back is, this is a military type quernstone.
Quernstones like this were used for milling grain into flour.
This is a community living here, using these to grind presumably quite large quantities of grain.
There are also signs that the native Britons were being paid for this work.
And this one's really nice. If you look carefully,
yep,
you can see that she's the wife of Septimus Severus.
Brilliant.
So this coin dates from about 196 to 211.
Right.
And it's a silver denarius. So this is the sort of thing Roman soldiers would have been paid with.
So is that indicating, well, they're buying things on site?
Yeah. They need everything. They need leather, they need animals to eat, they need grain, they need food stuff.
Right.
All of that kind of stuff.
The archaeological evidence is helping us make sense of this intriguing site. It was part of an agricultural landscape within Roman Britain.
Just look down the dale, Upper Swaledale, lovely rich pasture area. The individuals who occupied or owned this were switched on to realise it is essential to 4 Roman forts. We think now this is a well-to-do, well-established, developed farmstead, but they're dealing with the military. You know, their wealth has come with the husbandry of the cattle, the sheep. It could well be the collection point for the whole dale. This is where it comes, this is where it's processed, then off to whichever fort is needed.
And there's still plenty to be discovered.
We need to do the research question where the water's coming from. With all this engineering on site, they can't have been going to the spring to get it in buckets. It must have been ducted on site. And that it will be pivotal to what we do next year.
This site has shown how Roman influence extended into the countryside, where native British farmers could grow rich by supplying food to the Roman military. Many archaeological digs focus on one particular time period, but our next site in Cheshire spans some 10,000 years from the end of the Stone Age through to the 17th century. We sent archaeologist Nisha McSweeney to find out more.
The Poulton Research Project sits just 5 miles south of Chester, close to the Welsh border. This unassuming stretch of farmland may be one of the north of England's most significant archaeological sites of recent times. I'm joining dig leader Dr. Kevin Coots to find out why.
So, Kevin, how did it all get started?
We've got to go back to 1962.
Right.
Mr. Jerry Fair had just taken over the land and he had historic maps of this field. And he could see marked on it an ancient chapel. He could also see the stones, just poking out.
Right.
And he found a glazed medieval floor tile of 14th, 15th century date.
Right.
Eventually, the farmer persuaded teams from Cheshire Archaeology and Liverpool John Moores University to come and excavate the site.
They knew they were going to find a chapel, but they were hoping it would be a capella ad portam.
Capella ad portam, that sounds like something at the gate.
Yeah, my best Latin,
Right.
which is not great, but it means it's a chapel at the gate.
Right.
Because we have a lot of ancient literary texts that
Right.
tell us that there was a missing abbey here, the Abbey of Poulton.
Poulton Abbey was an ancient monastery founded in the 12th century by Cistercian monks. They often had a chapel at the gate so lay people could worship without entering the abbey grounds. The abbey was moved in the early 13th century, but the chapel continued to be used as a local church and cemetery right up until the English Civil War.
It would have been the place where the farmers and their families who actually ploughed the land and worked the land for the monks, that's where they would have worshipped and where they were buried. We didn't expect to find any bones in this graveyard because this is what we call glacial till, or I call the older red boulder clay because everyone knows what it is, and it's generally acidic. But by a sheer geological coincidence, the last great glacier deposited a whole load of crushed calcite in the field, making it neutral. So we have almost perfect preservation of the human remains in this medieval graveyard that we've been training students on for the last 24 years.
This geological anomaly offers an incredible opportunity to study the lives and deaths of one community over hundreds of years. I've joined human remains specialist Ria Carlin to see what she's found in this year's excavations.
What's going on here then? What do we have?
We have an adult skeleton and it's almost complete. So we've got perfect bone preservation here.
Osteologist's dream.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
Yeah. The burial itself is cutting two other features here. So we had a double burial here, juvenile bones in, which itself was cut by a later burial of a teenager in here. So the gravedigger might not have known that there's a burial there. Maybe the wooden cross had disintegrated or they didn't have a burial marker. So,
in terms of dating then, where would we put this in terms of the lifespan of the cemetery?
probably toward the end, sometime before the Civil War at least.
And by that time, the cemetery's been in use for maybe a couple of hundred years already.
Oh yes, so that would be, the graveyard would be almost full, as you can see by the intercutting features. Yeah. So we just need to take off a little bit of the clay that's still sticking to the bone while it's wet.
Just clean it up a bit here. Okay, so that was just one bone. How long does it take to lift the entire skeleton then at that rate?
It will take us at least the rest of today, maybe a little bit of tomorrow morning as well.
How many have you had on this site to date?
What are we, 986 this one? I think so, 990 I think we are up to now, 990.
That's a lot of excavation, that's a lot of analysis.
It is, isn't it? Absolutely, yeah, it's a big storage room.
Finding the perfectly preserved remains of one community over a 400-year period is fascinating in itself. But what is most incredible about Poulton is that as archaeologists continue to dig down, they realise the site had been occupied for far longer than anyone had previously thought.
What comes before the medieval period then here?
So the medieval grave diggers were actually digging into earlier occupation layers and they were throwing it back in with the medieval burials. So we were getting Roman pottery, we were getting Saxon material, we were even getting material from the first hunter-gatherers to recolonise this area after the retreat of the ice sheets.
Kevin believes he knows why countless generations have kept returning to this location.
We're standing on a site with 10,000 years of human history. Why here in this one place?
Wow, that's a really good question. And the answer is right here in front of us. This is the perfect spot for settlement. That is actually the old Pulford Brook.
Right.
The historic boundary of England and Wales. It's heavily changed now from its original form, but it would have been wider, more free-flowing. You would have been up in this section here, and you would have been looking at the large animals coming down to water. It would have been like shooting fish in a barrel. And it's a floodplain below us. So when the floodwaters recede, it leaves behind very, very nutrient-rich silts, which are really good for agriculture.
And then it moves up through time, through to the extensive Iron Age occupation, into the Roman period, Saxon period, then the medieval period.
Basically, people don't change. People's basic needs stay the same. You need security, you need raw materials, you need water, you need food, you need to survive. So people are always going to inhabit the kind of place where they've got the better chance of survival.
What started as a dig in a small medieval graveyard has become the discovery of a site with 10,000 years of human occupation.
There's this wonderful sense of a community over not just centuries but millennia, and why they're here. And it's not immediately obvious when you come to this place the first time, but then when you start looking around the landscape, it all starts to make a bit more sense.
I've asked Kevin to come in and show me some of the artefacts from this incredible period of occupation at Poulton. Kevin, this seems like such an extraordinary site with so much time depth, so much going on. And you've got some of the finds here, they're lovely. Yeah. So what's the earliest find you've got on the table here?
This is a beautiful flint that was imported into the region, and it's late Neolithic, early Bronze Age.
That's lovely.
We think it's used for making leather items or possibly other wooden items, and it's absolutely beautiful.
So this is the evidence of the first farmers to move into the
Yes.
region then. And then, moving on, you found some quite spectacular Iron Age remains. I mean, what's this large lump of what looks like rusty metal?
It's called an adze, which is a woodworking tool. You can see the edge of the blade here,
Yeah.
and I'm holding it pretty much upright. There would have been a handle coming through here, and it's used for hafting and working wood.
And then the Romans arrive.
Yep.
So I recognise this as being Roman pottery.
It is indeed. This is a mortarium. It's a food mixing bowl, where the word mortar and pestle come from.
Yeah.
But on the back, somebody has scratched I-V-C-V. And it might mean the name of the owner, Luculla or Lucundus. Basically, this is mine, hands off.
Yeah. So what do you think you've got?
We think we've got, at the moment, a dispersed farmstead. But there is so much material culture, and we have so much to survey, we can't discount anything at the moment. Poulton's a real one-off in this region.
Yeah, yeah. And then finally, you've got these beautiful tiles,
They're
which
lovely,
takes you
aren't they?
right back to the original discovery of the site.
Yeah, they're gorgeous. They date to the 14th, 15th century. We've got several designs which are paralleling the local and regional designs themselves.
Yeah.
The medieval chapel floor would have been covered in these.
And when do we see activity ceasing? When's the last date that you've got from this site?
Well, we know it's in ruins by 1681. We think the last time it was used was in the English Civil War, because we have records that Poulton Green was manned by parliamentarian soldiers 3 weeks before the Civil War ended. And we've got material from the actual chapel of that date, including muskets shot. We think that they were basically melting down the windows to use the lead. They trashed it. They would have used it as a base. It would have been a great lookout post, a chapel with possibly a tower, but they trashed it.
I think this is absolutely fascinating, and we're getting this wonderful picture of, well, hunter-gatherer communities and then farming communities through the centuries, and this part of the landscape which is quite empty now. It is just farmland, but it's been quite densely populated through time, through all those farming generations, and it's great to see this picture of ordinary life. This year, the North has once again proven to be a region rich in archaeological discoveries. From forgotten Tudor homes to Anglo-Saxon treasure and a long-lost Viking drinking hall, we've shown there's still so much to do to widen the bounds of our knowledge and shed light on our past.